Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 303 of War and Peace. Chapter 303. Having put on French greatcoats and shakos, Plea and Dólokhov rode to the clearing from which Denísov had reconnoitred the French camp. And emerging from the forest in pitch darkness, they descended into the hollow. On reaching the bottom, Dólokhov told the Cossacks accompanying him to await him there, and rode on at a quick trot along the road to the bridge. Plea, his heart in his mouth with excitement, rode by his side. "If we're caught, I won't be taken alive. I have a pistol," whispered he. "Don't talk Russian," said Dólokhov in a hurried whisper. And at that very moment they heard through the darkness the challenge, "Who is there?" and the click of a musket. The blood rushed to Plea's face, and he grasped his pistol. "Lancers of the 6th Regiment," replied Dólokhov, neither hastening nor slackening his horse's pace. The black figure of a sentinel stood on the bridge. "Password." Dólokhov reined in his horse and advanced at a walk. "Tell me, is Colonel Gerard here?" he asked. "Password," repeated the sentinel, barring the way and not replying. "When an officer is making his rounds, sentinels don't ask him for a password," cried Dólokhov, suddenly flaring up and riding straight at the sentinel. "I'm asking you if the colonel is here." And without waiting for an answer from the sentinel, who had stepped aside, Dólokhov rode up the incline at a walk. Noticing the black outline of a man crossing the road, Dólokhov stopped him and inquired where the commander and officers were. The man, a soldier with a sack over his shoulder, stopped, came close up to Dólokhov's horse, touched it with his hand, and explained simply and in a friendly way that the commander and the officers were higher up the hill to the right in the courtyard of the farm, as he called the landowner's house. Having ridden up the road, on both sides of which French talk could be heard around the campfires, Dólokhov turned into the courtyard of the landowner's house. Having ridden in, he dismounted and approached a big blazing campfire, around which several men, talking noisily, sat. Something was boiling in a small cauldron at the edge of the fire, and a soldier in a peaked cap and blue overcoat, lit up by the fire, was kneeling beside it, stirring its contents with a ramrod. "Oh, he's a hard nut to crack," said one of the officers who was sitting in the shadow at the other side of the fire. "He'll make them get a move on, those fellows," said another, laughing. Both fell silent, peering out through the darkness at the sound of Dólokhov's impetuous steps as they advanced to the fire leading to the horses. "Bonjour, messieurs," said Dólokhov loudly and clearly. There was a stir among the officers in the shadow beyond the fire, and one tall, long-necked officer, walking around the fire, came up to Dólokhov. "Is that you, Clément?" he asked. "Where the devil—" But, noticing his mistake, he broke off short and, with a frown, greeted Dólokhov as a stranger, asking what he could do for him. Dólokhov said that he and his companion were trying to overtake the regiment, and addressing the company in general, asked whether they knew anything of the 6th Regiment. None of them knew anything, and Plea thought the officers were beginning to look at him and Dólokhov with hostility and suspicion. For some seconds, all were silent. "If you were counting on the evening soup, you have come too late," said a voice from behind the fire with a repressed laugh. Dólokhov replied that they were not hungry and must push on farther that night. He handed the horses over to the soldier who was stirring the pot, and squatted down on his heels by the fire beside the officer with the long neck. That officer did not take his eyes from Dólokhov, and again asked to what regiment he belonged. Dólokhov, as if he had not heard the question, did not reply, but, lighting a short French pipe which he took from his pocket, began asking the officer and how far the road before them was safe from Cossacks. "Those brigands are everywhere," replied an officer from behind the fire. Dólokhov remarked that the Cossacks were a danger only to stragglers such as his companion and himself. "But probably they would not dare to attack large detachments," he added inquiringly. No one replied. Well, now he'll come away, Petya thought every moment as he stood by the campfire listening to the talk. But Dólokhov restarted the conversation which had dropped and began putting direct questions as to how many men there were in the battalion, how many battalions, and how many prisoners. Asking about the Russian prisoners in that detachment, Dólokhov said, "A hard business dragging these corpses about with one. It would be better to shoot such rabble," and burst into loud laughter, so strange that Petya thought the French would immediately detect their disguise, and involuntarily took a step back from the campfire. No one replied a word to Dólokhov's laughter, and a French officer whom they could not see, he lay wrapped in a greatcoat, rose and whispered something to a companion. Dólokhov got up and called to the soldier who was holding their horses. "Will they bring our horses or not?" thought Petya, instinctively drawing nearer to Dólokhov. The horses were brought. "Good evening, gentlemen," said Dólokhov. Petya wished to say good night, but could not utter a single word. The officers were whispering together. Dólokhov was a long time mounting his horse, which would not stand still. Then he rode out of the yard at a foot pace. Petya rode beside him, longing to look around to see whether or not the French were running after them, but not daring to. Coming out onto the road, Dólokhov did not ride back across the open country, but through the village. At one spot he stopped and listened. "Do you hear?" he asked. Petya recognized the sound of Russian voices and saw the dark figures of Russian prisoners round their campfires. When they had descended to the bridge, Petya and Dólokhov rode past the sentinel, who without saying a word paced morosely up and down it. Then they descended into the hollow where the Cossacks awaited them. "Well now, goodbye. Tell Denisov at the first shot at daybreak," said Dólokhov, and was about to ride away, but Petya seized hold of him. "Really," he cried, "you are such a hero. Oh, how fine, how splendid, how I love you." All right, said Dólokhov, but Petya did not let go of him, and Dólokhov saw through the gloom that Petya was bending toward him and wanted to kiss him. Dólokhov kissed him, laughed, turned his horse, and vanished into the darkness. All right, that's my reading of chapter 303 of War and Peace. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 303. Not the Footprint. Fear is the alchemist of temperament. It has the power, says Fenimore's Deerslayer, to make the wise silly and the strong weak. The transformational properties of fear, whatever power they may have, are non-material and cannot be measured. They emerge, ghostly, from a reactionary confusion in the mind, triggered by incident independent of sentiment and insensible of passion. When Robinson Crusoe, for instance, finds another man's footprint in the sand of a beach he believes himself to be the sole occupant of, the fear he experiences is not about the footprint. The fear is his reaction to the footprint. Fear of danger is 10,000 times more terrifying than danger itself when apparent to the eyes, Crusoe reflects later, and we find the burden of anxiety greater, by much, than the evil which we are anxious about. In today's chapter, Tolstoy provides us with contrasting approaches to dealing with a dangerous situation. That situation, of course, is Dólokhov and Petya's penetration into the enemy camp. No doubt their action poses danger to the infiltrators. Dólokhov, however, checks his fear, while Petya indulges it. Dólokhov is cool. He moves into the French camp like he owns the place. He doesn't even blink when complications arise. He wills himself to the soldiers' campfire and takes a seat with total conviction. Once there, he gets the information he needs, and then he takes his leave just as easy as he came. Petya, on the other hand, is completely terrified. He advertises his terror from the start when he assures Dólokhov that he's equipped with a pistol should things go south. Dólokhov probably doesn't even consider that things could go south. While Dólokhov is busy ushering them safely through the French camp, Petya is too petrified to even speak. Finally, once the danger has passed and the two are safely trotting back to their own camp, Petya's wild emotions, ecstatic of escape, corrupt and ungoverned hugs and kisses for his new hero, Dolokhov. A Year of War and Peace would rarely advocate looking to a character like Dolokhov for inspiration on how to live the good life. But today, in this specific instance, it might be a good idea to do so. His ability to separate his feelings about a dangerous event from the dangerous event itself, and therefore not get carried away by said feelings, is an admirable trait that we should all develop. Daily meditation. A passion, therefore, consists not in being affected by the sights which are presented to us, but in giving way to our feelings and following up these chance promptings. Seneca, on anger. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 303 of War and Peace. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes, along with links to my Amazon wishlist for books and movies. If you decide you want to support me by purchasing a book or a movie, that'd be great. I'd appreciate it, and we'd set up a Zoom call to talk about that book or movie. At any rate, thanks for joining me once again, and tomorrow we are going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 304 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.